Before we get to reviews, let's just do a little segment here. You guys ready for this?
Oh,
hit me.
It's a little segment called The Rest of the Saga.
One of those.
So here we go.
Again? Here we go.
Again, yeah. Steven Allen Spielberg was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the middle of December 1946. He was from an Orthodox Jewish family. His mother was a restaurateur and concert pianist, and his father was an electrical engineer working on the forefront of computer development. At the age of 4, his family moved to New Jersey, and then only 3 years after that, they moved across the entire United States to Phoenix, Arizona.
Ugh.
7-year-old Steven had a tough time during those transitions, making and keeping friends. And to make it worse, he suffered incessant bullying at school because of his Orthodox Judaism. Steven would often spend time alone in his own, where his only companion was his imagination. He would sit for hours watching the shooting stars and at night, wishing desperately that he could somehow bring his inner imaginary world out into the real one. Somewhere around his 12th year, his wish would be granted, as he would make a discovery that would not only change his life, but the movie industry as we know it. What he discovered was his father's 8mm Kodak movie camera. Once young Steven realized the power of film, his upward trajectory seemed unbroken after that. Even his childhood itself would act as a part of the inspiration for the J.J. Abrams film Super 8. At 12, he would be awarded his photography Boy Scout merit badge by doing something no one had ever done before to gain that badge. He wrote, directed, and filmed an almost full-length Western movie. By the age of 16, he had honed his craft even further, and he spent $500 to film a 140-minute sci-fi epic called Firelight, which would be shown in the local movie theater, and it would actually end up breaking even. Eventually, at the age of 27, after being rejected from film school, working odd jobs in the movie industry, and getting to direct a few TV episodes, he would get called up to the big leagues to direct an actual studio-produced movie. The studio that called him up had just purchased a right to a novel that was about some big-ass shark or something, and they thought it would make a really good horror feature to get the kids in the seats and buying popcorn. But Spielberg saw this opportunity differently. He saw this as his big chance to prove himself. The movie he was given, named Jaws, would go on to take his career from the cruising altitude of 20,000 feet and launch it into space, figuratively and literally. With his newfound fame and newly gained respect to the movie industry after making the highest grossing film of all time to that point, he had the unique opportunity to choose and create his next project. He was thrown scripts left and right, but instead of looking to the future, he looked to the past, to his first independent feature film, Firelight, and decided to take the ideas in that film and magnify them by 1,000. Firelight, you see, was about humanity's first contact with an alien species. He added some Richard Dreyfuss and a dash of mashed potatoes to his original movie, and he eventually came out with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This movie would be another box office smash for the young Spielberg and go on to be with Jaws on the list of the best movies ever made. During the filming of the movie, though, Steven had his doubts that it would even break even when it eventually was released. The science fiction movie genre in the 70s was less comprised of monster films and campy space fantasies with buxom young lads and lasses that would always flop in theaters. And this movie was none of that. And it even added elements of philosophy and a dive into the human condition, which seemed like a recipe for disaster for the mainstream cinema. One day while filming, Steven got a visit from a friend he had met while trying to break into the film industry. Even with his massive success on Jaws, and maybe partly due to his lonesome childhood, he was still a true friend to even those down on their luck that came to him asking for a buck or even some advice. His friend was trying to make his own movie, and the studio had decided to give him a meager development budget and a very short leash. The movie was proving to be a nightmare to make, and it was already running over budget, over schedule, and there was the fear the studio would just pull the plug altogether any day now. All the stress had given Steven's friend a severe hypertension, and he decided to take a few days off to visit Steven to see if he could get any pointers and maybe relax a bit before he had a total nervous breakdown. Steven and his friend clicked like they had never been apart. They laughed and talked a lot over the old and new times over the next few days. And Steven confided in his friend that he was afraid his movie was probably going to flop. And with all the money that Columbia had invested in their new wonderkind Spielberg, the failure would probably mean that Columbia would have to shutter their doors and close down. Spielberg's friend almost guffawed at that. Walking around Steven's set of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he yelled, "This is going to be the biggest hit of all time. I can't believe this set. I can't believe what you're getting, and oh my goodness." He paused for a moment and looked pensive for. All right, I tell you what. I'll trade you some points. You want to trade some points? I'll give you 2.5% of my movie if you give me 2.5% of Close Encounters. Steven smiled wryly and took his hand and shook it. Sure, I'll gamble with that. Great. Close Encounters of the Third Kind would go on to make $303 million at the box office. The bet the two men made would end up breathing new life into his friend. And as he knew he would most likely have this windfall to fall back on when his movie flopped or was canceled, he returned to the set with a new spring in his step. Well, you'll be happy to know that Steven's friend's movie did eventually get made, and it even saw a limited release in 32 theaters on opening night. The movie went up on the big screen just a few months shy of the release of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, with the vague title of Star Wars. Of course, the rest is history. Star Wars had become the highest-grossing film of all time, and George Lucas would not forget that handshake over that gentleman's bet. And as a man of his word, he traded 2.5% of his movie's profit for 2.5% of Close Encounters of the Third Kind's profit. And that's how Steven Spielberg came to own 2.5% of Star Wars. That has netted him an estimated and adjusted for inflation $40 million to date. And that is the rest of the saga.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, BFF, man.
Yeah, I love how George Lucas was such a worrywart and such like one of those like advanced, like stressful, self-deprecating people that he's like, my movie's going to suck so bad, I'll give you points on it. I swear, because that way when it does suck and no one likes it, at least you'll know that I knew that was going to happen and I won't be as lame.
Yeah.
It cracks me up that Lucas is that personality. It's not a surprise either.
No.
But you know those people who are like, hey, I totally did this thing. It's awful. Come take a look. Everybody knows that. Yeah. That person.
Cracks me up that they had the flexibility to be able to offer points on their movies back then.
That's because the studios are like, we don't even care.
You don't even.
Yeah, just do whatever.
That crap don't happen no mo.
Yeah.
Nope, not no mo. So Steven Spielberg making some money for nothing.
Mm-hmm. For
his chicks were free.
Taking a buddy on a walk.